Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. What is the Women's Global Cancer Alliance? What is the Alliance doing to help eliminate the scourge of cervical cancer, especially for women in Haiti? We'll be back in just a moment to talk about these and other important issues. Welcome back to our program. Today we're looking at the horrific problem of cervical cancer and what one group is doing to try to help the women in Haiti to overcome this problem. My guest today is a knowledgeable person and the founder of a really unique organization. My guest today is Dr. Bob Hilgers. Dr. Bob Hilgers is the president and CEO of the Women's Global Cancer Alliance. Dr. Hilgers is a board-certified gynecologic oncologist and professor emeritus at the University of Louisville School of Medicine in Louisville, Kentucky, in the United States. He is a past member of the Society of Gynecological Surgeons and the European Society of Gynecologic Oncology. He's also been an observer of healthcare in Tibet, Nepal, and Cambodia. Some other past achievements include being named honorary consultant, Charing Cross Hospital and Westminster School of Medicine in London, England, honorary professor at Sun Yat-sen University of Medical Science in Guangzhou, People's Republic of China, and an honorary member of the Argentina Association of Gynecologic Oncology in Buenos Aires. Dr. Bob Hilgers, welcome to today's Global Connections program.
Thank you.
You've got a very impressive resume, and I left most of it out. You've really done quite a bit. Let's talk, Bob, about what you've been doing with the Alliance, and what exactly is it? When was it formed? Why was it formed? What do you do, basically?
Well, the idea germinated in about 2005, 2006. In actuality, it took form in 2007 and 2008, and it became formally a 501c3 in 2009. Mm-hmm. Its design is to advance women's health, but in a very unique way, advancing women's cancer, in other words, gender-specific cancer that can be identified with women only, as it relates particularly in developing countries, because the whole issue of cancer is quite different in developing countries than it is in Western industrialized nations.
Mm-hmm. Now, in your many international travels, you went in 2009, you went to Zambia to look at their cervical cancer program.
That's right.
They apparently had one of the best in the world. What did you find that sort of tied into what you're doing today?
Well, first, I still believe that they have the best program, the best model program for developing countries. I went there to study their program because I knew that as we advanced forward, particularly now that we knew where we were going to work in a nation similarly impoverished by the poor socioeconomic conditions, that this would be an ideal situation for me to study. And it was from that point of view that I was able to study the various clinics that had put together the see and treat method, and they had done an exceptionally good job in terms of preventing, through screening, cancer of the cervix.
Now, as we look worldwide, not just developing countries, but really developed countries also, do we find that there are enough women, or are women being properly screened for cervical cancer? Do you find that the services are not available for one reason or another, perhaps due to income or perhaps inaccessibility to the screening process? Are women being treated for this, or are we able to identify early enough that they might have a potential problem?
Generally speaking, the women in the Western industrialization nations are very well screened. They're screened with the pap smear. In developing countries, it's quite different. Here, the poverty makes it very difficult. I should really say the socioeconomic conditions and the lack of education, including the high rate of illiteracy, makes it very difficult for these women to have access to screening. The lack of resources added on to that. But if you do not know the value of screening, if you don't know what cancer is, you don't know what, let's say, your sister died of after she had some bleeding and that sort of thing, it's very difficult without raising awareness and educating these women.
It certainly is. Now, if we think back to January 12, 2010, and the horrific disaster that took place in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, it was a 7.0 earthquake on the Richter scale. We saw that large parts of Port-au-Prince, the capital, basically was in rubble. It's estimated now that over 320,000 Haitians or people in Haiti died at that time. Over 3 million were adversely affected. You had over 30,000 businesses that collapsed, that were unable to function after that. It was just one of the most horrific problems to hit any country, especially such an impoverished country such as Haiti. Of course, we saw the United Nations agencies, many of them are already on the ground. The UN Children's Fund, the World Health Organization, UN Peacekeeping were there, and even they were adversely affected. But you went down shortly after that, and what did you find when you went to Haiti a couple of weeks after that earthquake had happened? And we saw that the relief or the efforts were coming in from non-governmental organizations, governments, the United States government, many others were coming in. What did you find when you went there as far as devastation in tent cities and that type of thing?
First, I must say it's rather unusual for a GYN oncologist or a gynecologist to volunteer on a medical relief team under crisis management. But it was, Port-au-Prince, it was totally different than any other experience that I had with that large city. The first thing I did is I have some very close Haitian friends, and I started to look for them. And interestingly enough, all of my close friends survived. I'm not sure why. But the devastation I don't have to build on, because I think everybody knows how just horrific this was. We went into a small slum area of Port-au-Prince and did primary care, and this was 2-3 weeks after the devastation. And some of the medical problems that, due to trauma, that we met were really unusual. People with broken backs, with broken ankles, with dislocated shoulders that had been sitting around for, let's say, 2 or 3 weeks without any help and with tremendous pain, and then all of the associated factors. The tent cities came up very shortly thereafter. There were 1.5 million inhabitants living in tents. And the devastating impact of living in a tent city is that, as you know, in Haiti, you're subject to really some rather severe tropical storms and hurricanes. Some of these did not have floors. Some of these had worn canvas floors. And, when the rains came, it was exceptionally difficult for these people to live. I have been to Haiti many times since, and I've now noticed, just visually from my own experience, that many of those tent cities are now gone. But the estimate is that there are probably still about 320,000 people in tent cities. Some of those were moved out of the city in small villages and that sort of thing. As far as reconstruction goes, over the last couple of years, I think the thing that impresses me is that they are getting the rubble up, and they are tearing apart the buildings. But it's almost all by hand. They don't have a lot of heavy equipment. It's a remarkable period in their history.
This is, for many reasons, one of the most devastating, one of the most unique natural disasters to ever hit any country, especially with all the rubble that people had to remove and that type of thing. Well, Haiti is one of the poorest countries in the world. It's the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. It has 10 million people in an area about, I'm going to guess, about 1/7, 1/8 the size of the state of Kentucky, which is not a large state, 42,000 square miles, or about 75,000, I guess, kilometers, something like that. But what do you do in Haiti to help identify and to help eliminate cervical cancer? Because Haiti apparently has one of the highest cervical cancer rates in the world. But what can be done down there to help?
Well, it's very interesting, but cancer of the cervix is very closely related to poverty. 90% of the women are impoverished, one form or another. They do not have access of care. And even if they did have access of care, they don't have the resources to take advantage. The unfortunate part of Haiti is that they do not have a national cancer or any type of cancer treatment center. They have no fully trained specialists. They have no radiation therapists. And for women, pap smears are generally not available for, again, that very impoverished group, which is the majority of women.
Mm-hmm. Now, you brought a couple of props with you that
Yes.
you're going to show. How do these two items tie into what you're doing in Haiti, especially as far as focusing on identifying the potential of having cervical cancer or identifying if a woman has it and what can be done at that point?
Well, as I just mentioned, pap smears are not an ideal form of screening women for cancer of the cervix. And so one has to go to a different way of screening. And the preferred method in a developing country is the see and treat method. And what you do is you just simply take household vinegar, nothing more than that, and you apply that to the cervix. You let it set for a few minutes, and then you take a look at it with a medical set of binoculars. You see certain patterns, and then if you see a pattern that is suspicious for precancer, early cancer, and this sort of thing, you then freeze it with with liquid nitrogen. Now, just to emphasize the point, if you fill up this medicine container, this is basically a 1 ounce container with vinegar. This equates to saving a woman with cancer of the cervix. It equates to screening one woman with cancer of the cervix. Mm-hmm. If you take that to a larger extent, the potential is that you can screen 250 women with a gallon of vinegar. So that vinegar, which consists of acetic acid, which is the primary chemical in this situation, is the connector, so to speak, in terms of screening these women. It's an extremely valuable tool.
It certainly is, and it's certainly very inexpensive, $2 or $3 US dollars to buy whatever we have, a container over there, a gallon or more.
$2.69.
$2.69. It's certainly very easy to do that. And I'm sure our viewers, many would like to learn more about your organization. They can go to www.womensgca.org. And of course, you are a membership organization, and you are trying to involve more people in helping with it. Now, you're in Haiti. You're also, I didn't mention earlier, that you're an avid photographer, and you have taken some really interesting shots in Haiti. And we're just going to talk over some of your photos. But I remember one photo was a woman with a tank. And what exactly was that? Another one was with your clinic that you had. Another, you were in your medical garb. Talk a little bit about those particular settings.
The first photograph that you're talking about is a typical see and treat clinic. The director of the clinic is a Haitian midwife, and she's sitting there against the exam table. And next to her is a large tank of liquid nitrogen with what we call a cryo gun. In other words, the instrument that can be applied to the cervix and can freeze the cervix for 5 minutes. This happens to be a typical see and treat clinic. It's at the alma mater hospital, in which we were very much of a catalyst in setting up in Graman, Haiti, a community of about 30,000 in the mountains of northern Haiti. The other photograph that you're alluding to happens to be a patient that I saw also at that particular hospital. She had had some bleeding that we were discussing the possibility of investigating the bleeding, and she happened to be absolutely a wonderful, wonderful lady. And I must say, I am so impressed by the Haitian people. I know they get a lot of bad press, but I also know dealing with them one-on-one, they are remarkable people, and how resilient they are with all of the tragedy that they have had to face over their lifetime.
And that word you said, resilient. Resiliency is the word I've heard more from Haitians and also from people who've, outside folks who have been involved in trying to help the Haitians deal with this horrific disaster. But they have their history, they've got a rich culture, They're delightful people, beautiful people, but they've had a tragic history to a large degree, especially from the political standpoint and the devastation, economic devastations befallen Haiti, and as well as other things. They've got a lot of ecological, environmental problems and other things to deal with. But this is one example of what people can do, and do it very inexpensively to help and to short circuit this problem, overcome this problem of cervical cancer. Now, one thing you're doing is you're working with the Minister of Health in Haiti to develop a national cancer treatment center and also a national cancer registry. What would be the advantage? Why do we need those two things, and what will they do to provide even more assistance?
Well, let's start with a national cancer registry. We have been very fortunate in being able to work with the Kentucky Cancer Registry, and they have a nationally, internationally recognized model. Dr. Tom Tucker of that, who heads that organization, has been very helpful in giving me tools and information to take to Haiti. So we have taken disease codes to them. We have assisted them in terms of attending national and international meetings as to how to set up things. The IARC, which is the International Agency of Research Cancer out of Lyon, France, has been very helpful. They are a French-speaking group, and they can work with the Haitians, who are both French and Creole speaking, and that sort of thing. We've also discussed the pitfalls to them, in the sense that they cannot really have a fully reliable registry until they can diagnose every case of cancer in Haiti. And of course, that at the moment is not possible. But the National Cancer Treatment Center now appears to be on target at last, meaning that the ground will probably be broken at the end of this year or the beginning of next year. That's the great white hope for me, and the great black hope for them, because they just they need it so badly. They estimate they're going to be able to see and treat 2,200 new patients a year with cancer, not just cancer of the cervix, but all kinds of cancer.
Mm-hmm. That is so extremely important. When you look at the situation in Haiti, do you find, I know you're down there, there are a lot of non-governmental organizations. I mentioned UN agencies, the U.S. government, many other governments are involved. Who are some of your key partners, as far as, are the folks you work with on a periodic basis, the UN World Health Organization or other groups like that, to tie into what you're doing, and vice versa?
Well, I think the most reliable organization for us is actually the Haitian Ministry of Health. And we work with the person who heads up their cancer division. And that has been the most useful connection. The World Health Organization now has what they call the NCD, which is a non-communicable disease group. As you know, the UN had their meeting this past September, or a year ago September, and have now fully moved ahead with a number of other organizations. NCD is under the umbrella of the WHO. And the non-communicable cancer is included in those non-communicable diseases. So cancer finally is beginning to rise up further and further in the ladder of the international community. If I can just add one more point. In Haiti, when you have malnutrition, when you have chronic diarrhea, when you have tuberculosis, when you have AIDS, when you have malaria, where does cancer fall? It's down at the bottom of the barrel, and yet, in 2010, it has been identified, or cancer has been identified, as the leading cause of death worldwide. So we are trying very hard to raise the level of awareness, pulling cancer from below and trying to get it back up on top. It has a higher mortality rate than TB, AIDS, and malaria together.
Mm-hmm. It certainly does. When you mentioned AIDS and some of those other physical problems, it brought to mind the United Nations Millennium Development Goals.
Yes.
Were adopted in 2000. The majority of the members of the General Assembly of the United Nations came together, and they adopted 8 logical, practical, measurable goals to reduce abject poverty by 50% by 2015, to promote primary school, universal primary school education, to empower women, number 3, to reduce infant mortality rates, to reduce maternal mortality rates, to reverse the AIDS pandemic, to promote sustainable development, and also to promote international cooperation. A lot of what you've been talking about today seems like ties right into those Millennium Development Goals. Were they part of your planning? Did you look at the Millennium Development Goals, or did you just move forward and add them a little bit later? Or
No.
how did they interact with you?
We looked at them.
You looked at them.
But,
Okay.
But we were surprised that nowhere was cancer mentioned. And cancer is not in the Millennium Goals. The closest that we can come is women's health and AIDS, because cancer of the cervix climbs on the back of women who are HIV positive. Their immune system drops. The virus that causes cancer of the cervix moves in. Now with drugs that we can keep AIDS under control, they live longer and they increase the risk of cancer of the cervix in that population.
One of the two I think you could add now is number 3, empowering women. If you save a woman's life, you've helped empower her. That's
Well,
for sure.
no question about it, but
That's
that was
right.
within that bundle.
Exactly.
That
No, I understand
was,
that, right, yeah.
You know, I'm being focused on
No,
health,
I understand.
obviously.
In fact, as I recall, people, experts, I'm not an expert on them, but people who were involved in the drafting tried to come up with 8 practical goals that everybody could mobilize around, and the vast majority of people have. The countries of the United Nations, all 193, are on board trying to achieve them. You've got non-governmental organizations, faith-based groups, international service clubs like Rotary International, Lions International, Kiwanis have signed on to some of the goals. So I understand they couldn't put everything in there, but they do want everybody to be involved.
Yeah.
Well, we were talking about Haiti and the situation with women, and you're working to build clinics and to really focus the spotlight on this problem of cervical cancer. As I mentioned, though, Haiti is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. We've seen there's been a tremendous amount of progress as far as the Haitians recovering from this, going through the rubble, trying to move the rubble out of the way. They're rebuilding. They're in the process of rebuilding now. Hopefully they're building buildings that'll be earthquake-proof. As you look at Haiti, you look at the United Nations agencies, you look at what governments are doing, what recommendations would you proffer to help people to think about what they could do to lend a hand to the Haitians as they go through this very lengthy rebuilding stage, because it won't happen over a year or 2 or 3, because you still have some people living in tent cities, you have so many people who are afflicted with physical problems. But what would you recommend that can be done to move it forward?
Yeah, I'm not absolutely sure that I can, that I'm qualified to answer your question. Primarily because I'm so focused on the cancer issue. I would just simply say that when I brought a similar type of question up, because I get people to ask me, well, what are you doing about housing? What are you doing about food? What are you doing with water? Aren't these the principal problems? Why are you dealing with cancer? And as my Haitian colleague said, as I asked him that question, he says, everything is a priority. And I don't know how to build a house. I don't know how to purify water, but I do know something about how to take care of a woman with cancer. And that is where my skill is, and that is where my contribution can be and will be.
It's a very interesting project that you've undertaken. It's a very important project, and I'm sure you save hundreds or thousands of lives in Haiti, of women's lives, and you will certainly do much more of that in the future. I know when I was reading your bio, you mentioned that you were a lifelong student, and I guess we should all be lifelong students, because every experience is a learning experience, and we all have a contribution to make. We can all pitch in and lend a helping hand to people in Haiti, or perhaps in other parts of the world, and certainly in our own communities, be it Hoboken, New Jersey, or Sacramento, California, or La Paz, Bolivia, wherever it might be, that we all have a role to play. But it's a very important project, and I want to thank you so very much for a very interesting and a very informative program.
Thanks, Bill. I appreciate it very much.
Thank
if I
you.
could just say one final comment
Yes, please.
in Creole. Simone, Timon Simone. That's in Creole. Every human is a person. And let's not ever forget about the Haitian people, for they are as human as we are, and their families matter as much as ours.
Perfect ending.
Okay?
I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us on today's Global Connections program.